whether you should run as a Democrat or whether it's more effective to run like a third party, like Dr. Cornel West. So why are you running as a Democrat as opposed to Cornel West kind of attacking the system from the outside?
Well, first of all, I don't think either choice is illegitimate. You know, if you look at American history, third-party voices are very significant. You know, abolition came from the Abolitionist Party, women's suffrage came from the Women's Party, Social Security came from the Socialist Party.
Yes.
So I think it's terrible the way the Democrats and the Republicans have formed an unholy alliance over the last few years, making it very difficult for third-party voices to be heard. That is true. But I also believe that there was once a soul of the Democratic Party. You know, there was the Rooseveltian, unabashed, unequivocal commitment to the well-being of the working people of the United States. We cannot allow a vision of real justice to be completely peripheralized. I'm not willing to say, okay, two major political parties, you get it. Corporate power, corporate control, peripheralize any sense of real humanitarian values when they in any way challenge the corporatist tyranny that now has hold of our country. No, I'm not willing to say, I'll just stand over here and say it, okay? Is if I want to do that, I can just write about it in books, which I have. They don't mind third-party candidates unless they feel that the third-party candidate could actually be a threat, and perhaps that's what Cornel West will represent.
Got it.
Marianne, as you probably heard, we interviewed here one of your opponents, RFK Jr., and we asked him specifically about Medicare for All. And his response, and people can go back and watch the exact words, but I'm paraphrasing here, was effectively, in theory, I support single-payer healthcare, but I think it's politically infeasible. You just laid out a domestic agenda that many people, including people on the left, but I think more broadly, would really support, including universal health care, including universal child care, paid family leave, all of those things. But how do you get around the fact that, you know, you're certainly going to have, even if you have basic control of the Senate, you're unlikely to have a filibuster-proof majority. You're certainly not even going to have all the Democrats on board with a more ambitious program of economic reform because of all the failures of the Democratic Party that you've laid out before. So how do you make such an important agenda actually politically feasible, or is that a legitimate critique?
Well,
welcome to a special edition of RBN Live. We have an RBN Live or RBN Friday panel, and let me go ahead and bring them in already. So, what's up, Kit, and what's up, Colin? Welcome to RBN on this Friday. Thanks for joining me, guys.
It's good to be here, and as always, there's a lot to talk about. Thanks for the opportunity. I noticed it was last minute, but I was more than happy to tune in and add in my 2 cents to, well, just what the heck is going on with Supreme Court and how the Democrats are going to spin this.
Yeah. And what's up, Colin?
What's up, CJ? Thank you. I'm on vacation in Atlanta right now. But I've been watching this. I knew the decision regarding student loan debt forgiveness was more than likely going to break today. So I was watching with the most interest, and obviously it went as we all predicted it was going to go. It's no surprise to us. That being said, you know, for a person who is still has student loans and is trying to pay them off currently, it's still a hard blow to accept. But yeah, but as Kit said, it'll be interesting to see the spin of how the Democrats will spin it in terms of how they're going to get the illusion of helping when they're kind of proven that they have no intention of doing anything. So,
and I think that applies to not just the student loan, but like a lot of these rulings, including the abortion rights ruling, that lands squarely in the lap of the Democratic Party, because they're paying the I can't help, but they always have the majority most times. But they, I can't help that the Republicans are doing all of these things to us, and we just have to stop buying that as a voting population. For those that do vote, we have to stop buying that, because that's just simply not the case. These people are working. It's a dance. They're working as a team to do this, and we're going to point to that. Or get to that story second, because I do want us to build up a little more audience. So, because that's the top story, is the student loan debt, and we want to get a little more people in here, because this is an important conversation to have. Because we got to get ahead of the spin. They're going to be spinning this, and we need to get the real message out there. So,
True.
But I do want to start with this, and I started with this interview because I saw a clip on Twitter where Marianne, she posted it herself, so I'm assuming, or tweeted it herself, so I'm assuming she wanted this out. But it was her talking about Israel, and then I went and pulled the full video, and it's not good. So we're gonna analyze probably the first 10 minutes of this video first. But I did want to start with this question that she's posing to Marianne Williamson, because we all, everybody on the panel and everybody probably listening wants some form of Medicare for all single payer sort of system nationalized, from spectrum to spectrum. Because I would rather nationalize, but Medicare for all is a step in that direction, I guess you could say. But she is trying to pose a difference between RFK, because clearly RFK is beating her ever since he got in the race. She hasn't eclipsed him, or he is beating her, and they need him out. So all of her minions in independent media is out, putting sort of this RFK is different. Both of them are Zionists. But more importantly, to this question, sorry, before I go off on a tangent, to this question, they're trying to say that him acknowledging that, hey, in theory, I do want it, but I don't see any feasible way that that's going to happen. Is that an acknowledgement that both capitalist parties are not going to, march that way? And two, she is trying to make it seem him acknowledging that, or at least saying that, is different than her saying she does want it, but trying to do it through the Democratic Party. That is the sort of difference they're trying to lay out here. And I wonder if either of you had a comment before we actually get her answer.
Colin, you could shoot first, man.
Okay. I feel with what RFK said is probably more truthful than what Marianne is saying, because, and this is the issue that we're coming up now with student loan, not student loan debt, with Medicare for all. Biden has said that he would veto it. So it would be a question of, one, how you're going to get it to pass in the House, and then having to get it passed in the Senate somehow, and then somehow getting Joe Biden or whatever Democratic president will be coming in after to sign it. So that in of itself is going to be one issue. Now, let's say for whatever reason, it passes through Congress, and then whichever Democrat president signs it. Okay. We just saw what happened in the Supreme Court over the last few days, right? So and Savvy, shout out to her, played this, what David Pakman said years ago. If it ends up passing, there will be a challenge, right? If privatized healthcare isn't made illegal, there's going to be a challenge in the Supreme Court. So the other question is, how are you going to tackle what is now a conservative Supreme Court in order for Medicare for all to be viable? So all of that to say, these are things that I think we need to talk about more on the left, in terms of how to strategize moving forward on we essentially have to make a swerve. We can't go through the proper electoral politic avenue of trying to get Medicare for all. We have to do this in another way. So all that to say is, I think, and as much as what I hated RFK saying what he said, I think he is more realistic in terms of having to meet that challenge, not just in government, but in Supreme Court, having to make that be viable enough for it to go through, than what Marianne is saying here.
And I want to add to that, because, and then I'll go to you, Kid, because it is so important that we are honest to working class people and not giving them these false hopes. So that's the reason why, I wouldn't have said what RFK said in that way I would just say I support it. Just say that.
Right.
You don't need to add the caveat. But this is really like, you're threading a very small needle of difference in her advocating for it. But the reason he's saying this is not viable is because neither party will actually let that happen. So I don't think it would even get through committees. It's so many people bought by the health industry. I don't think it would even get to committees. It would be so many people like doing things to torpedo any sort of legislation that looked like Medicare for all, adding sort of different types of pork, stripping things out, like giving little loopholes. It would just be written with all the people that's bought by the healthcare industry and all their subsidiaries in the health industrial complex. I just don't see how it would get through any party. So that makes the question, how is what Marianne Williamson is saying any different? If you tell me, this is the analogy I always give, Kit, and I'm going to pass it to you after this. If you, Kit, say, I'm not for Medicare for all, and Colin says, I am for Medicare for all, but Colin's strategy to get Medicare for all is to rub two sticks together, aren't you effectively both not forgetting Medicare for all? Because I'm not interested in the rhetoric. I'm interested in the getting across the line. So, Kid, go ahead. If you take that,
all right,
take that what you want.
I don't like either Marianne Williamson's answer or RFK Jr.'s answer, but to jump on the same talking point as Colin pointed out, RFK Jr.'s answer was at least more authentic and real. And when I hear him make that statement, I was like, oh, okay, you're honest and upfront. I can respect that. I don't have to agree with it, but at least you're not once again blowing smoke up my wazoo, okay? And I want to be careful with how I swear and everything because YouTube and its guidelines and all that other stuff. So let's be clear here with Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson upset me with this answer because it sounds very akin to what Bernie Sanders said. And while I do respect these words and it sounds great, it does. These are words. There is actions and deeds that need to take place, and you have to take on the neoliberal establishment. The only way we're ever going to get Medicare for all or any kind of real kind of healthcare for the American people is if there truly is one big institutional collapse that causes the oligarchy that's ruling over our quote-unquote republic no longer viable. We cannot have this parasitic system in place if we truly want Medicare for all and a merit-based society where, I don't know, people are getting by running their own businesses and not going into medical bankruptcy. So to our foreign international audience that's watching us overseas, we have a thing called medical bankruptcy here in this country, okay? It's a bad thing to have as one of the leading causes of homelessness. So Marianne Williamson's answer is childlike, in my opinion, and if I'm being harsh on it, so be it. But it's just a way to get some sheeple to go along and say, "Oh wow, she's for Medicare for all." But follow through. The key word is follow through. RFK Jr.'s statement is more authentic. Okay, I wasn't expecting him to fight for Medicare for all. I'm not expecting him to take up that issue, and it is an important issue to me. But you have to have a plan to take on the oligarchs of the two-party system. And I'm just going to say something controversial here, and I'm going to use this word in regards to how I view RFK Jr. running his campaign in the Democratic Party. He's as much of an outsider and progressive the establishment will allow to exist, and the Democratic Party is working double time just to get rid of him. What I find interesting about his campaign is what he can do and say and how the Democrats are trying to torpedo him like they did with Bernie, but it ain't working. And I'm curious to see how far he'll take this down the road because he did make that statement, and I want to see how authentic and consistent he will be with not saying that he will not support Biden as a nominee or whoever be the nominee. If he's in it to win it, okay, you sparked my interest. I won't vote Democrat, but I want to see how far you're willing to go because people like Marianne Williamson, Bernie Sanders, and AOC keep on tweeting these things, Medicare for all, Medicare for all. How are you going to fight for it? Don't tweet about it. Tell me how you're going to fight for it. How are you going to organize this? How are we going to take on the system? Because this will be a fight. If it's something you care about, show us. Don't tell me things I want to hear. Show me how you're going to do it. And that's what's going to cause the Democrats' failure, especially in 2024. And I am going to be eating it up because I want to see the Democratic Party implode.
Absolutely. So now let's listen to her answer, and then I'm going to rewind it back because how the interview was set up, is to talk about I think it was Ukraine and Israel, because those are the two things that are bad for her. And then they come to this Medicare for all question as to say this makes her the better progressive. And this is what we're getting from the professional managerial class. One, we don't need to compare the two, but if we were to choose, I would say being anti-war, not funding Nazis, is also important, if not more important. So to pretend or not being a Zionist, which is probably the big one of the, I'm not even going to say that compare the two, but is a big issue also. So those aren't big deals, but everybody getting, the rest of the people getting healthcare, or everybody getting healthcare under one system, that's a bigger deal. That just doesn't fly with me. They're either equal, or to me, some of that foreign policy stuff, we're talking about people being murdered by the military industrial complex here. We're talking, we see every day what's happening to Palestinians. So, but guys, I set them off. Let's listen to her answer. I'm going to back it up just a second so we can clearly hear the question again here.
You're certainly not even going to have all the Democrats on board with a more ambitious program of economic reform because of all the failures of the Democratic Party that you've laid out before. So how do you make such an important agenda actually politically feasible, or is that a legitimate critique?
Hang on, I feel like there should be more added. Let me go back a little more right here.
Single payer healthcare. But I think it's politically infeasible. You just laid out a domestic agenda that many people, including people on the left, but I think more broadly, would really support, including universal health care, including universal child care, paid family leave, all of those things. But how do you get around the fact that, you're certainly going to have, even if you have basic control of the Senate, you're unlikely to have a filibuster-proof majority. You're certainly not even going to have all the Democrats on board with a more ambitious program of economic reform because of all the failures of the Democratic Party that you've laid out before. So how do you make such an important agenda actually politically feasible, or is that a legitimate critique?
Well, Bobby, when he was here, also said in that same interview, I think, I'm a free market capitalism guy. Mm-hmm. So I don't agree that his only problem with getting to Medicare for all is that he doesn't think it's politically feasible. There's something else going on there. So this whole issue of agency capture by pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, big food, I certainly agree with that. But there's more to it than just getting them out of office. You've got to change the economic structure. And as long as the corporate subsidies continue, as long as the tax structure continues the way it is, of course, it will never be feasible. That's what Obama said before he went in. He said, I'm all for universal health care. Then, of course, once Democrats get in power, it's just not politically feasible. You were the one, Krystal, who I once heard say a phrase that just has stayed with me. We have been trained to limit our political imaginations. You don't lead from a place of what's politically feasible. A great leader leads from a place of this is what we need to do. Abolition wasn't politically feasible. The 19th Amendment wasn't politically feasible. Establishing the right of people to unionize wasn't politically.
Yeah, I can't.
No, I mean, seriously, I know you're lying. You're lying.
Jesus.
I've heard this. Honestly, it sounds like Bernie Sanders, but it's like nails to a chalkboard.
He didn't answer the question. He didn't answer the question.
Not at all.
Exactly. Thank you.
Krystal asked, "What's your plan?" RK basically said it cannot be done. What's your plan to get it done? That's essentially what she asked. She didn't answer the question.
She just points to successful movements that weren't through electoralism, the movements that the PMC class don't want to do. I hate the comparison when you're comparing those events. There was mass protests happening about this before the voting stuff happened. So what, you know what I mean? Civil rights legislation came up after all the pressure through the direct action. Years. It wasn't a few months. This was years of direct action that culminated in the civil rights movement legislation. It's just a flipping of history. It's a retelling of history that's simply not true, trying to tie her candidacy and electoralism to those movements is just being disingenuous, in my opinion.
It's not only disingenuous. This is a straight up lie from a woman whose campaign is effectively, quoting the Vanguard, is out of steam. It is out of steam. Her campaign is done. All right. She is not in the double digits anymore, and she's trying to resonate with whatever remains of any kind of supporters. She went through 2 campaign managers already. All right. And here she is once again going on breaking points. Mind you, again, there's a conflict of interest here. That presidential candidate just officiated over Kyle and Krystal's wedding. There's a conflict of goddamn interest here. Is anyone going to call it out? I know Due Dissidents talked about it. I know RBN's talked about it. Jimmy's talked about it. We talked about it. But yet, what? We're not going to see this vain attempt of somehow putting relevance back into a campaign that's already irrelevant. It is 2023, and it's already too late for Marianne Williamson's campaign. She can't go anywhere. She's stuck in the mud.
Absolutely. And just as you pointed it out, I do want to bring up the headline since you pointed out that, and I don't know if people know, but she has been, what's the right word? She has decided on a new campaign manager right here.
And they'll retire in like
2 months. It's the New Hampshire rep. I think his name is Jose something, but I'll bring up his name, but he was the rep for the New Hampshire state, her New Hampshire state rep. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And let me get his name right here in the doodad, so all of us can see here, guys. Right here. So, because I got to read a little bit into the article. Marianne Williamson, new campaign manager, ready to expose Democrats. And I saw this on Newsweek in preparing for the show.
Really?
And I'll just scroll down. Yeah, I don't need to read the whole. Yes, exactly. We're gonna see if it's not 4th time a charm, but we don't need to read all of it. I just wanted to get his name. Okay, Carlos. My bad. It wasn't Jose. It's Carlos Calderon right here. And he is the he will be elevated. He is the New Hampshire state director. That's his official position. So he will be elevated, but I don't know if people remember, he actually went on Bad Faith podcast with Bree. And
really,
it was the interview. It was him and the Texas rep. It was the interview that did not go well because she was trying to get them to answer, what do you think of those people that are saying, I'm done with the Democrats, they're not delivering? Like, how are you selling them? And they just said, just accept it. Basically, accept it. Didn't end well. A lot of people did content on it, but that's one of the guys that was in that interview. So I'm saying that to say she's supposed to be this insurgent campaign. Do you think that's going to be the case with this new campaign manager who literally has said he's going to support Joe Biden in the end? Like no. I don't get how this is going to go for her, but go ahead if you wanted to comment and we'll get back to the video.
Yes. I'll keep it short and I'll hand over to Colin. Here's the best way I could describe Marianne Williamson's new campaign manager. This seems like a kayfabe script that you'd see in the WWE or ECW, where the campaign manager says, yeah, we're against this and this and this and this and this. And it's an act. This is an act. He already showed us what he really thinks in that Brianna Joy Gray interview. Well, then there you go. This is an act. It's a lie. Expect the Democrats to lie to you. Expect that. What, ready to expose Democrats? How exactly? Please tell me how you're going to expose the Democrats. Already did it for us. They already revealed to us who they are. Take it away, Colin.
I mean, I don't have anything. It surprises me, given how Marianne is more in tap in independent media, that, again, it's the idea of, are you really that incompetent, or you are just purposely doing this for whatever means you are? And I refuse to believe, even with Marianne, given her, I would say she has a more amicable relationship with Bree, that she wasn't aware of that. So it just shows, I think this is, if there was more of a telltale sign that she's going to sheepdog people into the Democratic Party, it's probably that. The idea that she's
Yeah.
going to hire a person who is already kind of giving, speaking prominently for the Democratic Party, that should be a red flag to people of where her campaign is going to go. I mean, I know you guys at RBN and HardLens have said this multiple times, but this should be a clear indication to people now, given what Carlos has said. And I kind of vaguely remember him on that faith, that that should be a warning sign to people.
Yeah, I do agree. I must agree. Let's listen a little more. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me back it up now. So let's cover Israel and Ukraine, and then we'll go ahead and get to the student
Very
loan
excited to be
information.
joined today
Could I also
by
add in something here, too?
presidential.
I'm sorry, Kate. Go ahead.
Yeah, with this whole thing that she's gonna be bringing up about Ukraine and everything, I know that Nick went in detail to try and explain to her about the situation, to which then she vilified him and wrongly accused him of mansplaining. And I think it's long. I saw this video too, but again, I think it's long overdue that Nick gets an apology from Marianne Williamson, because this statement that she's gonna be making is pretty controversial, and not just controversial, but shows how much of a hypocrite she is. Again, challenging and exposing the Democrats. How exactly? Please tell me how.
Yeah, and that's a good preface to this video here, because I don't hear a challenge. And I mean, you guys in the audience, tell us if you hear a challenge to the establishment in this part
extensively. What do you think that this aborted coup attempt means for Putin, and especially means for the Ukraine war and our involvement in it?
Well, in terms of what it means for Putin overall, we don't know all the facts yet. I mean, we went from Prigozhin's a traitor to, all charges are dropped, we're sending him to Belarus. So we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But we do know this. We do know that Putin looks vulnerable now in a way that he hasn't during his entire tenure. And
you tell me you can't find this opinion on MSNBC Corp. This answer blew me away, because I didn't know she was gonna dive right into corporate media propaganda, serving it so publicly. That is literally what this is a sign of weakness. That's their whole line in corporate media. So that answer was surprising to me. But let's continue.
Oligarchs are watching. The people who are really in power in Russia are watching. So this definitely hurt him that way, no matter how it shapes up now regarding the specifics of Prigozhin. And that will affect the Ukraine war. I certainly think it has given a psychological boost to the Ukrainians.
So, Marianne, what do you think about continued U.S. military aid currently to Ukraine? How would your policy be different from Joe Biden's should you be elected president? And do you think that regime change, instability like this inside of Russia is a desirable goal?
Well, the reason it's not a desirable goal is because of nuclear bombs. It's dangerous. If there were to be regime change in Russia, we don't know that it would be people who would be better for us. So any instability there, it cannot be taken for granted as a good thing for the United States.
Do you understand how that is a very imperialistic point of view? Because she didn't say they're a sovereign country, they can do what they want. She said she is arguing whether regime change. So the very fact that you're entering a debate as if this is a valid thing to do is saying you're on board with imperialist actions, or you may not see imperialist actions as they are, because that is not a good answer to the question that is being asked. Is that, well, we're not sure if we destabilize this region if we're going to get a better person in power. That's such a imperialist point of view. I'm amazed again.
I'll even go a step further. I can remember even before the 2016 election, during that time, after the 2016 election, everyone's saying, oh, we need to do something about Putin. And even before then, people are talking regime change, war in Russia. All these liberals were talking about it, okay? But see, it's one thing to talk about it, but if it actually happens, it's goddamn frightening, because, yeah, they are correct. We don't know who will replace Putin. See, everyone wants to make Putin this big old bad guy. But the thing is, life goes on. The world is not a Marvel movie. There is no end credits where everything lives happily ever after. The world goes on. Who's going to replace the guy that you don't like? Could be somebody good or somebody who's far more challenging, will go that extra mile and spin in your face. See, what these warmongering Democrats don't realize is that their actions through Russiagate and their own hypocrisy and censorship is coming back to bite them, and they don't really know how to juggle all these lies now that they put together. And here we have Marianne Williamson saying, oh, well, you know, we don't know the full story. Everyone in corporate media during that weekend when Wagner was marching to Moscow saying, this is it, it's civil war. The articles are all out there. Every single corporate media outlet showed the whole world here in America just how incompetent they are in doing their jobs and reporting the facts. They're saying Putin's afraid, he's running away. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. And dare I say, I think I'll go a step further. I think what we saw was a well-scripted act. Again, just my opinion, but it just seems too nice on how it all just cleaned itself up. It's almost like they played everybody out to be a fool for a bigger story or a bigger plan that's going to happen here. Again, just an opinion. But again, Marianne Williamson is just talking out the point of corporate media and, oh, we don't know the full facts yet. Well, maybe you shouldn't be adding your opinion onto this, Marianne. You are running for president after all.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing to me because it's being presented as these are good answers, and they're not. They're
That's
not.
number one.
No.
In terms of Joe Biden, he seems to be taking an attitude.
I'm sorry, Colin. Were you gonna chime in?
No.
I couldn't. I don't.
No,
I can't
go
see
ahead.
you guys. Okay.
No, go ahead.
For as long as it takes. I certainly don't think we should be saying as long as it takes.
Okay. So here's where she thinks she's making she is different because he asked the question, "How are you different?" So this is what the professional managerial class does. They try to make these language differences like these huge, make them like huge. These are huge differences between us, and they're not. So let's listen to what she's trying to say is a difference here. I'll back it up 10 seconds.
As a good thing for the United States. That's number one. In terms of Joe Biden, he seems to be taking an attitude of for as long as it takes. I certainly don't think we should be saying as long as it takes. We should be putting this thing to bed as soon as possible. The issue is, how do you do that? It's easy.
As long as it takes versus as soon as possible. Did anybody really know what the difference is in that?
No.
That's literally phrasing difference that is supposed to be meant as some big divide between her and Biden. There's no difference essentially between the two. And we can continue. Let me know whenever you want to stop. I can't see either of you.
That's fine. No, but it's what the thing is that this whole conversation of Marianne Williamson is not only nauseating, but it leads to the point she doesn't know what she's doing. She's in an election cycle to where at once when she was the only one in town, she was the big fish in the small pond, and now there are larger fish in. Dare I say it? She's the big fish in the ocean. She's not ready for this. She's incapable of doing anything. And how strong is her ground game, especially reaching out to voters? It's not strong at all. Have you seen her host town halls or events? She's on Fox News, and they basically mock her. She's just there.
I'm starting to feel sorry for her sometimes, but not when she has said some of these answers.
What?
Not when she says some of these
Holy
answers.
shit! Hold on,
Why
hold
you-
on. This is Compton J. Are you a pod person?
Because no, I'm saying because she's so terrible, and it's almost like she's oblivious to how terrible. You ever feel like you feel sorry because it's like, man, you don't even understand how bad you look.
No, I gotta push back on you.
Saying.
I gotta push back on you. When I used to do my early morning shifts at Costco back in the day, I forget which musician or actor was going through a scandal. This is like maybe 2014, 2015. So it could have been any one of these jagoff actors.
Yeah.
And I said, I feel sorry for him. One of my coworkers worked maintenance. Says, don't you ever say that. They don't feel sorry for you. They would never feel sorry. Just say this. You would be embarrassed to be them. I would be embarrassed to be Marianne Williamson right now, especially what happened to her campaign. No sympathy. No.
I'm so embarrassed for her. That's what it is. I'm so embarrassed for her.
No, it's her ego. Her ego, and she doesn't care because either way, she gets a little bit of airplay. She gets a little bit of media time, from anyone who gives a damn to watch her or listen to her. So it's only going to profit her as far as her personal profile, like when she's done, it will kind of keep her in these circles for a bit. So she doesn't care. Like, she's not any better than many of these politicians who are currently in Congress now. So she doesn't care.
It's like a win-win. You're basically saying it's like a win-win for her.
And
Yeah.
by extension,
net win.
breaking points. So, but I feel like just with this relationship, this is what it is about. They get to benefit, from Marianne having these exclusive with her, which already has worked because they have 1 million subs now. They broke that barrier now. So it gives them more credibility in that, and it gives exposure to Marianne. I think, especially in this space, we're talking about her. She gets a little bit of play from mainstream media as well. So it's keeping her limelight shining for however long she chooses to. So no need to feel sorry for her. This is just going to benefit her in the end.
Right. Like going through these critiques is the work you have to do to get the paycheck in the end, basically, to get the book deal in the end. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like I said, if I woke up and I was married, Marianne Williamson, I would be, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. But see, the thing is, a lot of these people don't have shame either. So she knows she's lying. She's just saying things that people want to hear. So anyone that's been watching Breaking Points think, oh yeah, Marianne Williamson, she's our gal. No, she ain't. Why don't you go try working for her? Come back to me and tell me what's it like to work for the Marianne. Oh, wait, you signed an NDA. That's right. So you can't tell me. She makes for people, again, Peter Douche. Tell us, what was it really like, buddy? Come on. It's okay.
They'll never tell us. They'll never tell us.
No.
Enough to say, we need a ceasefire. Well, both the Ukrainians and the Russians want a ceasefire.
Sure.
But the Russians definitely want a ceasefire. Great. Right now, what that means, they won. The Ukrainians say, we want a ceasefire. Russians need to leave here.
That's so asinine because there was attempts at peace talk. Hey, who stopped that? Oh, the good old US of A and the warmongers and war profiteering. That's who stopped it. Not to mention, you have a whole idea where this whole war was instigated and you provoked a guy like Putin. Okay, he ain't no saint, he ain't no angel. But maybe it's just my perspective living in Chicago. The last thing you do is start something with somebody who you know is crazy and will step up and get in your face. It's surviving in the streets 101.
Yes.
You just don't do it. And the government, our own government, is doing this. When you have Lindsey Graham saying, oh, yeah, we're killing Russians, it's the best money we ever made, and Nikki Haley sounding like a goddamn servant of the blood god Korn. Trump is the most reasonable person in the room. I want people to stop dying. Great. Holy cow, Trump's the most reasonable person, I guess. But she is unable to really call it the fact that there was a coup that we helped facilitate in 2014. And not to mention, there's a lot of politicians that have invested in a lot of pipelines and natural resources that are there in Ukraine. Case in point, the Biden family.
Mm-hmm.
Just throwing it out there. Colin, I didn't mean to cut you off because I know you were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. I can play. Let's play a little more of the video, and if she doesn't get past this and get to the next, because I want to talk about the Israel, because that's how I found out about this whole video.
We should support whatever efforts might be possible. There was a time when Xi went to Russia. We thought something big and important might happen. Zelensky said to Xi, call me. I want this. We're not living in a unipolar world anymore. The United States is not the only power broker here. Denmark, the foreign minister of Denmark recently said, we'll host a summit. He said,
Denmark is not a power broker. That's just a white Western chauvinist country. They're not a power broker. Marianne Williamson. It's just another, she just doesn't, she's out of her league when it comes to foreign policy, because we all know where this is going to end. It's going to end where Russia is taking a lot of the land of Ukraine as a settlement for this war to end. We all know that, and to still be pushing like that's not what's happening. That's what I mean by this like, so what's different about what she's saying than what Joe Biden is saying? She is using a different phrase to describe the same thing. That's all she's doing. So instead of saying, be there until it takes, she's saying, as soon as possible, as if that's a big difference. But then she goes right back to all the agreement, all of the pro-war NATO sort of talking points that Russia can just leave if they want. Really, with all the NATO equipment still there pointing in their direction, there's still the encroachment, still the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. It's unserious, but it is the talking point that NATO and NATO allies, Western chauvinist countries, do push, and she's pushing it now.
She's so incompetent in foreign affairs. She makes Gary Johnson look like a big-brained mathematician.
That's why I feel sorry for her. By the way, she looks that bad. If you get the comparison that Kit just gave, you get that comparison. She looks that bad, and that's why I feel almost sorry, but not sorry. I just don't want to be her. Is what I'm basically saying.
It can't just be Ukrainian allies. It has to also be others. I think that that's really what we're talking about here. I think some people see the United States as the only power broker that matters here, and it's simply not the case.
We do matter, though. We are,
because we're the ones funding them,
a significant power broker, if not the only one. Would you support potentially withholding?
So Krystal pushes back a little. It sounds like she pushes back. I didn't get to this question. I skipped to the Ukraine. Sounds because she said no, we're the most important, if not the only one, right after she just said we're not the only one. So that's sort of curious. Let's see what line of questioning that she goes into here.
You matter, though. We are a significant power broker, if not the only one. Would you support potentially withholding military aid to sort of pressure Zelensky to come to the table and accept what, in any circumstance, is going to be some difficult concessions if you were going to come to a negotiated settlement here?
At a certain point. I don't think this week is that point. Yeah, we're in the middle of a counteroffensive.
Oh God, not the
She just came up with foreign policy right there on the fly. She heard Krystal Ball basically make a good statement, and she said, "Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll do that at a certain point. Like, yeah, I agree, and we'll do that at a certain." This is pretty bad. This is pretty bad in my opinion.
Just go a little bit deeper into that. Again, the conflict of interest. She officiated over that wedding. They've been promoting her since the very beginning of this election cycle. As soon as she made her announcement, that's both Krystal and Kyle. Anyone find that a little suspicious? It's sort of like you're helping somebody cheat at their exam. Like, hey, right here, so you can get it, so they can have that exclusive access. Does anyone find that a little bit suspicious, or am I thinking too much into that?
No, you're onto something here. I just noticed, has Sagaar said anything in this interview at all?
Few.
We asked one question. I think. Yeah.
Not to give any praise to Sagaar, but he's generally more on foreign policy generally than Krystal is.
Yes.
So why isn't he, especially given from a right-wing base, why is he asking her more questions? It just seems that Krystal is just dominating so far this entire thing. And I've noticed that with every almost interview that they've done, like Sagaar is just kind of watching. So it stands to reason, why isn't Sagaar asking her anything over Krystal?
And that dynamic is completely opposite in their regular content. He's the one usually dominating the conversation, especially when it comes to foreign power. She's just sitting there as the yes girl. Hey, yeah, I agree, kind of thing. I agree. That is a great observation.
Like, it's similar to, like when you guys, RBN had Marianne on, like you guys, you were manning the board, but Nick and Sabby kind of teamed up and you guys asked certain questions to Marianne. Just so it was kind of a little more even in that regard. And I know you guys did that on purpose, just to kind of share the load a little bit. I haven't seen that at all with Breaking Points, especially given that they do have a right-wing audience that does watch them. I'm sure they would like to hear more from Sagaar in terms of having that perspective, kind of having that element in their interviews too. So it just makes me kind of pause as to why, because Sagaar is usually very more outspoken than what he has been with Marianne. But every time that I've seen that Marianne does interviews with them, Sagaar is just chilling, just in the background, just watching. And Krystal is kind of running the show. So it just makes me wonder if this is more on purpose, given
Absolutely.
Krystal's relationship with her.
I think that's absolutely the reason. He's not going to go after her friend, the person that married them. He's not going to go after them, even if he probably vigorously disagrees with her assessment of what she's saying. He's just going to sit back. Or, if this is a regular person that he didn't know, he would probably be asking questions and being like, you basically don't know what you're talking about. He would be asking questions in that sort of line of questioning, like, because he would pick up on stuff she's saying is like, this indicates that you don't really understand the issue, even from his point of view as a sort of a so-called right-wing populist. I think that's what they refer him as. But I think let me hear a little bit more, but I want to get to the Israeli question so we can end this segment here. I think she gets to it, but let's see.
And especially now with what's going on with Prigozhin, absolutely, that time might come.
So that time might come, but I think that the question is around the limiting principles and like, what does that look for you? So obviously you're concerned around nuclear war. We should also be concerned about the integrity of the Ukrainian regime, some of the makeup of those forces. Do any of the makeup of the forces concern you? We've been casting them, almost as a unilateral force, that, some force of democracy. And unfortunately, that doesn't remain the case. It doesn't mean that they don't mean to be invaded. So what is your view currently of the makeup of the Ukrainian government? What are some of the things you would look for in terms of what a potential negotiation would look like, and then what a future of Ukraine should look like?
Well, first of all, I do believe that they have a right to sovereignty.
Of course.
I do believe that they have a right to their own free agency. And I don't believe that they would be fighting the way they're fighting if they were just agents and puppets of the U.S. State Department.
That is a bold statement. She's saying that the Ukrainians are fighting, I guess she's saying bravely, because for their sovereignty and democracy. They're not because of their puppets. When we just had Garland Nixon on and Lee Kemp on yesterday talking about how they're literally kidnapping people and putting them in vehicles and running them to their certain death. And I reported on how they were tricking unemployed and poor Ukrainians into military service, to being put to their death in Bakhmut, when it was the meat grinder. They knew they were going to die and they were sending those people, and she's trying to pretend like they're fighting. This is what I mean. Like, she's taking some of the pro-Ukrainian NATO talking points as this is a real thing for freedom. Like, just admit what it is, even if you say that you should be funding them. But you see how they have to give this sort of Hollywood-like, Top Gun like messaging about the war that is just not true. It's just simply not true.
I've made this statement, and look, just bear with me because I think maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I'm preparing myself for when Hollywood decides to make a movie featuring, our favorite shit-lib actors who, sorry, shouldn't have swore, but our favorite jagoff actors and actresses talking about conflict in Ukraine. And I'm willing to bet Sean Penn's going to star in it, and they're fighting off the Russians and putting on this heroic image, right? This whole war is downright disgusting. People are dying. Families are being destroyed. And not to mention, we have the economic consequence of this inflation that is worldwide, and yet we are seeing billions of dollars get funded into this war, especially from the United States, but also European Union's doing that. Look what's happening in Europe. I mean, off subject, but if what is happening currently in France was happening in Moscow, how do you think the media would be covering that?
It's amazing that they're not covering that more, like considering all the stuff you can see on Twitter that I've just seen in the last day or two. It's just amazing.
Yes. And all of this was because a police officer shot a 17-year-old kid, right?
Right.
Shot a 17-year-old. And already France was recovering from those 800,000 workers that were protesting Emmanuel Macron's administration. See, that's heightened neoliberalism. And that's what Marianne Williamson represents. A neoliberal establishment just on par with Emmanuel Macron and every other jagoff superpower that we are witnessing right here. This is by far something so disgusting. They want to romanticize this. Also, another observation from this interview, it seems like they're just trying to prep her up to be ready for some eventual town hall or debate. This looks like a beginning cliff notes that Marianne Williamson's feeding her. Because again, Colin, what you just said, again, Krystal is dominating this interview. now I can't look at it any differently. I think they're trying to give her some cheat codes so that she's ready and maybe can polish up her answers in a future town hall or debate so she can really shine out.
I know, according to the Vanguard, that they said that Breaking Points is looking to have Marianne and RFK on at some point to do a town hall with them. So that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Okay. These people, they always have an angle, and the angle is never we're doing this for the people. Notice that?
No, it's for clicks and views for them. So no, of course. This
is terrible. No. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I will. Sorry, I'm talking to my daughter. Yeah, let's get back to the. Or I'm sorry. So I decided, since I didn't know how much more she was going to go on with the Ukraine and the other video, so I just went to Twitter to get the clip that's specifically talking about Israel, so we can close this segment here. So let's listen when she was asked about Israel's very short part of this video. So let's listen.
Do you support a two-state solution? What is your view of the ideal sort of settlement at this point, recognizing that Israel has continued to engage in these illegal settlements, taking more and more of the territory of the occupied territories and making it so difficult to come to any sort of two-state solution?
The settlements are illegal. The occupation is illegal. The blockade of Gaza is immoral, and it's wrong. There is a moral flaw at the founding of the state of Israel, just as there was a moral flaw at the founding of the United States. And just as the United States has had to deal with that and needs to deal with it, and just as they say in Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, the same applies to Israel. They're going to have to deal with this. There will be no peace until there's justice, and there is no military solution there. One of the problems we have is that we now have the most right-wing government that they've ever had. This isn't even the Netanyahu of a few years ago. So at this point, the United States needs to make it very, very clear that the basic tenor and the basic behavioral patterns of the Israeli government go against our own values, go against the values that we consider that which we should in any way support. Now, in terms of the money that is given right now, there's a memorandum of understanding until 2028. So it would take an act of Congress actually to withhold that money. But the United States absolutely can say that that money will not in any way go to activities such as something in the settlement, something in the occupied territory that in any way transgresses against our values. And as president, I would definitely make this clear. Biden's handoff approach there is not acceptable.
All right, it was hard for me to let that all play all the way through, but I did want to let it play all the way through, and then we can kind of break it down. This is what I call, and I'm going to put the banner up. I put out a tweet. I put out a tweet, but this is what I call the sympathetic Zionists. This is the lane that professional managerial class is known for, like just creating their own lane, because normal sort of things don't suit them, and they want to kind of straddle the line, so they create these lanes. And this is what I'm calling the sympathetic Zionists, where her policy hasn't changed. She still wants to fund Israel.
Right.
That hasn't changed. That is what makes you a Zionist. You're funding a colonial project in Palestine. So that is what makes you a Zionist. But because you say Palestinians deserve these rights and Palestinians deserve, you're just showing sympathy for the victim. That doesn't mean anything. And I'm going to give you this analogy. I gave it to my RBN members. It'll be like saying, I don't want slavery to end, but these conditions of the slave, we need to see about this. You see what I mean? Like right. That you're just being a sympathetic like slave owner. That's all you're being. Did you want to comment before we break it down? Anyone?
Colin, you can go first if you want.
No, go ahead, Ken.
Look, Marianne Williamson is a hypocrite. All right. When this conversation was being explained to her again by RBN, by Nick and Sabrina, she was quick to attack, smear, and deflect, and wrongly accuse Nick of mansplaining and so much more. When I hear her speak especially in regards to this situation that's happening in Israel and Palestine, I have to look her dead in the eye and say, I don't believe a single damn thing that you're talking about. And I don't, because even when she was even when I interviewed Marcel Dixon and his campaign, because he's running for Congress in South Carolina, as soon as he was having a conversation with her, and then he started saying things that she didn't agree with, she just straight up attacked him, verbally accusing him of everything, of being misogynistic and so much more. She's a liar. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And if she does make a coherent sentence, I don't believe her being authentic.
Touche. We can play the video then, because there is just points we just have to. I just have to make a comment on.
Do you support a two-state solution? What is your view of the ideal sort of settlement?
Do you support a two-state solution? She never said yes or no, and I think because she does support it, which makes her a Zionist,
Right?
And I think she doesn't want to clearly make that distinction. So let's let it play a little more.
This point,
And
recognizing
hold
that.
on real quick.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies. I have to step out real quick. There's a knocking at my door. It's a bad.
Yeah,
timing,
do you?
so.
Yeah. No worries. No worries. Do you? We're a proletariat network. This is how we run. So let's. So yeah, just hop back in whenever you're ready. Let's play it.
Israel has continued to engage in these illegal settlements, taking more and more of the territory of the occupied territories and making it so difficult to come to any sort of two-state solution.
The settlements are illegal. The occupation is illegal. The blockade of Gaza is immoral, and it's wrong. There is a moral flaw at the founding of the state of Israel, just as there was a moral flaw at the founding of the United States. And just as the United States has had to deal with that and needs to deal with it, and just as they say in Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, the same applies.
What the hell was she just saying? I have no what is she? That was a word salad. All she did is make affirmative statements to say something is good or genocide is bad. Right. Cancer is bad. Right. That's all she did. It's so weird. Go ahead.
Yeah,
oh, that was funny.
General rule of thumb, if nobody talks about how the U.S. is supporting Israel financially in terms of the destruction that they're causing in Palestine, then I don't want to hear it. Because that's really at the core of all of this, is how the United States in its imperialist power is supporting Israel financially in order for them to continue doing this. So if she doesn't speak to that, if she doesn't speak to in terms of, and she kind of goes there a little bit, but she doesn't go all the way in fully saying, I do not support our financial place in Israel, then game over. Like, she doesn't go there. So she's very much, and as you said, she kind of tweaks around the edges, saying a lot of niceties and trying to bring, Black people into this conversation. But it's not. It's nothing. Like, she just said a whole lot of nothing here. So she knows, and I think she might know better given the business that you guys gave her when she was interviewed with you guys. But so this is her way of kind of tap dancing around the issue without explicitly saying, I do not support the U.S. in our financing of Israel and what we're doing in Palestine.
Yeah, it is just terrible. I'll play it, but I actually want to play this again because I want to just read what's on the screen. I'm not gonna let her say it. All she is making is the settlements are illegal. Think about what she's doing. All she is making is statements that everybody understands.
Right.
But she's not making a stance on anything.
Right. But she's not saying why. That's the thing.
Right. Exactly. And she's not giving it why. Yeah.
Why. She doesn't go into that. And which is why I'm saying it's the imperialism that she's not mentioning here. And our role in that. So yeah, as you said, CJ, she's just saying the statements that I think everyone can agree with, but she's not tackling the heart of the issue. Our involvement, due to our financial stake in Israel, is the core of the problem. And if she doesn't address that, game over.
Everything else is just talking around the lines. But this is another statement that stood out to me. There is a moral flaw. There is a moral flaw at the founding of the state of Israel. And that is what needs to be expounded upon. You're nicing it up. At the founding, there's a moral flaw. You see how it's a warmongering imperialist not having the ability to critique the same thing you did. That's essentially, so if she critiques that, then she has to critique the United States, and she has to say, well, we're the same. And that is essentially why the United States is so buddy-buddy with Israel, and they're fine with this colonization, because they did the same thing, and some of the things that they're doing to these Palestinians, they wished they could have done to natives and enslaved Africans. But that is another statement, and I'll let it play unless either one of you wanted to comment here. I'll let it play out now.
I mean,
Okay.
let's just in regards towards Israel. I mean, it's stuff that we've already said. Like, it's important for us to be critical of the actions of that government, because they are brutal, downright deplorable, and it shows a lack of empathy and compassion. And yet, our own government here is giving the green light to this. We are turning a blind eye to human rights abuses. And yet this is something that we keep on saying, that we have to keep on supporting the actions of this government, yet it keeps on getting more extreme, more right-wing, to the point to where it is revealing itself and its policies. I mean, we are seeing an open genocide take place. And if it's the fact that it's been ongoing for so long, and we have our own government has allowed it, it really says about the mindset of really the influence of the Israeli lobby. I mean, even at this point, look at how they went after Roger Waters, who's been doing this show, The Wall. For Christ's sakes, I mean, The Wall is about satire and making fun of fascism. And one thing that should be pointed out is that that entire show, The Wall, they had a performance of it done in 2020 in Israel. I mean, nobody wants to talk about that. Right.
Right.
Anyone want to bring that up? Nah, probably not.
Absolutely. All right. So let's continue. Thank you, Kit.
Just as there was a moral flaw at the founding of the United States. And just as the United States has had to deal with that and needs to deal with it, and just as they say in Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace. The same applies to Israel.
Black Lives Matter, that was co-opted.
There will be no peace until there's justice, and there is no military solution there. One of the problems we have is that we now have the most right-wing government that they've ever had. This isn't even the Netanyahu of a few years ago. So at this point, the United States needs to make it very, very clear that the basic tenor and the basic behavioral patterns of the Israeli government go against our own values.
What does that do? You see how soft that is? Like, we need to make it clear. Go ahead.
A carefully worded letter.
Yes. That's a better way to put it. I was going to say we need to give them a strongly worded letter. And then you have her stands, her Marianne Williamson stands, acting like she's not a Zionist now that she said this. It's amazing. It's amazing what the professional managerial class, how they're just willing to change the definitions of things in order to suit what they want to do. It's so like taking a page out of the ruling class sort of handbook that these petty bourgeois sort of professional managerial class types do. But this is not her not being Zionist. This is literally not a change in policy. This is her saying we need to tell them these things are against our values, but we're going to still give you money though. But this is still against our values. Like, what does that do? Essentially. All right, let's close this out, fellas. Let's let it play to the end. Final comments, and then we'll get to the student loan.
Go against the values that we consider that which we should in any way support. Now, in terms of the money that is given right now, there's a memorandum of understanding until 2028. So it would take an act of Congress actually to withhold that money.
But you can still say, if I was president, I would want to defund Israel because of what they're doing. You see how she's fallen back on a law so that she doesn't have to give her opinion? That is pretty terrible. That is pretty terrible, in my opinion. You can end it here. Any final words on that interview before we get to the student loan? We'll go to Colin and then Kit.
As I said, this should be proof for our audiences to kind of show how weak a candidate Marianne is. And, you know, I gave a prediction that her campaign will probably be done by the beginning of next year. I think she already knows it's done. I think right now this is just for show. For who? Probably for the stands. But I can't imagine, given how low she's polling in comparison to RFK, who's posing a bigger threat, and now even Cornel West, who just entered, is polling significantly better than Marianne did when she first started. You know, I can't imagine her campaign, you know, going much longer. In a way, she's already done what she's needed to do. She's given Breaking Point's credibility. They've already have 1 million subs already. Like, that's kind of how I saw this. It's like, you know, tit for tat. You know, she gives them the exposure. They get that corporate funding and promotions now that they hit 1 million. And she gets a larger profile that she's able to write her books or whatever else. So, you know, that's kind of how I see it. So really her mission's accomplished here. So, you know, they're just milking her now for what it's worth for a little bit longer. And then,
yeah,
you know, she'll sheepdog us, well, people who still stand, to the Democrats come next year. So, yeah, that's all I got to say. But yeah, she's done. There's nothing here, you know, if you're on the left, that makes her viable to me.
Kit.
Well, I look at Marianne Williamson as a show candidate. That's all. She's there to show up, maybe spark some buzz, but I think any kind of power or influence she had has already fizzled away. There has been numerous reports about her being abusive to staff. She's lost 2 campaign managers. She's got another campaign manager that has said it's time to expose the Democrats, but yet there's video evidence showing, oh no, everyone shut up and take it, vote Democrat. So this campaign is lackluster and out of steam, to quote the Vanguard boys, okay? It is out of steam. It is done. It's been done for a long time. I think Breaking Points is doing everything they can to salvage her campaign to make sure it still stays afloat, but there's nothing they can do. They got to 1 million subscribers, good for them. But now, guess what? Her campaign is done. She has revealed herself as being nothing more than a typical neoliberal Democrat, and she'll go ahead and write a book about her, you know, challenges of being a strong candidate on the campaign trail and trying to uplift others. But it ended. So she's got enough to write a good book. She'll probably have a chapter talking about RBN and be like, "Oh, they were so mean to me."
Funny.
You know, that's, I mean, because that's it. I have to say this. I don't view her as a credible candidate. She's on par with Chris Christie. No one likes her, just like no one likes him, and they both need to bow out of the race because they're both unpleasant individuals.